The next presentation will be given by two colleagues from Berlin. We are connected remotely with them. It's Torsten Hiltmann, the professor for digital history at the Humboldt University in Berlin, and Philipp Schneider, a research assistant at the chair of digital history at Humboldt University in Berlin, and they will talk about their project Coats of Arms in Practice, where they are building a heraldic database that is linked with data on coats of arms and context of their use. Torsten and Philipp, the floor is yours.
Hello, I hope you can see us, and thanks. And thank you for having us. I will just share my presentation. I hope you can all see this. If not, please interrupt me. Okay, so our our presentation focuses on the reuse of archival data from a research perspective mainly. We would like to give you a presentation on the preconditions archival data and GLAM data in general has to meet from the point of view of data-driven research, especially when such research draws data from across multiple institutions. But first, we shortly want to introduce our project to make it more transparent to you where we come from and in what way we are working with this archival data. And yeah, as Thomas Eichner already said, it's called Coats of Arms in Practice, and it deals with coats of arms as means of communication and thus as sources of cultural history. And coats of arms were a system of signs that originated in the High Middle Ages and that were also and that were since then widely adapted as a way to mark persons, groups, institutions, and also abstract ideas. And as you can see on the slide, they were used in a huge variety of contexts. The first phase of our project focused on the way coats of arms functioned as means of communication and how they gained the success they had as such in the late Middle Ages and also in early modern times. And the second phase of our project is now concerned with the concrete development of coats of arms as a means of communication. We are interested in how they have become more complex over time and how the range of possibilities for their use and for their form has become more and more differentiated. And for this purpose, we are developing an infrastructure built on multiple digital approaches. And this infrastructure will integrate heraldic data from multiple historic sources, while most importantly, also keeping the historic context of these sources. And the most prolific and relevant types of sources for us are medieval manuscripts, seals, and heraldic mural paintings, so paintings on walls and also ceilings. And these sources can provide us with such historical context, but to varying degrees. And to just list a few important points, some sources with coats of arms on them let us attribute a given coat of arms to a specific person or an institution. For example, if we have a seal and the surrounding text on the seal describes who this, who gave the seal and who this coat of arms on the seal belonged to. And secondly, through dating the source a coat of arms is used in or on, we are able to fix a date in which a certain coat of arms was used by its bearer. And furthermore, if we have multiple occurrences of a coat of arms of the same person, family, or institution, we can track the development and changes of the coats of arms used by this person or institution over time. And finally, if we use large data sets, it becomes much easier to also study marginalized groups in this context. For instance, also Jews could bear coat of arms, but they presented them nearly exclusively on seals and not in very great numbers. So you need to have a large data set and a huge variety of data to actually do some inferences about this. And so since coats of arms were used in this huge variety of different sources, we have multiple instances of the same coat of arms. One single coat of arms may, for example, be found on multiple seals, but also the same one in other contexts, like in manuscripts, on hero paintings, or on a tapestry, or on a box, as you can see, or on glass paintings. And therefore, one instance of a coat of arms on one particular source is always connected to other instances of the same coat of arms on other sources. And so we are interested in multiple information. Firstly, the image of a historical source, like a seal with a coat of arms on it, its provenance. So, in the case of the seal, which document was the seal part of, and also the context of its provenance. So, when was this historical source used? By whom was it used? And in what other context did the coat of arms on it appear? And the goal of our project is then to build this digital infrastructure that would cover all these different aspects. By using semantic web technologies and machine learning, we aim to detect, link, and integrate heraldic data from multiple sources and enrich it through connecting it to the linked data cloud. And this will allow us to study them with qualitative as well as quantitative methods on a large scale and based on precise data and on their temporal and historical context. This approach needs the integration of data from multiple data repositories provided by a variety of institutions across Europe. This includes, for example, databases describing and contextualizing coats of arms themselves, but also other databases that are not dedicated to heraldry as such, but that provide data on the various types of historical sources you've seen here before, like manuscript seals, charters, glass paintings, and so on, which are all sources coats of arms can also be found in. And since our goal is to study the use of heraldry as a pre-modern tool for visual communication, we need to process images of seals or document as well that include coats of arms, but that were until now not listed in catalogs or in archival descriptions. And to achieve this, we use image detection methods based on machine learning. We already trained a model to detect coats of arms in medieval manuscripts with promising results. And we, in the meantime, also trained a model on the architecture Yolove version 4, specifically to detect coats of arms in seals. And the results you can see here are, of course, only a representation of the results that are created or that were created by Yolove. More important for us than these images, of course, is the possibility to further process the detected coats of arms in an automatic way. Yeah, like you can see here, the little file is in essence a depiction of the bounding boxes where coats of arms were found, and yeah, the image class what was found on the image. And after that, our next step is to make the acquired coats of arms machine readable. Only then can we make individual occurrences comparable to other ones and identify which coats of arms were used in which other documents, on which other seals, and in which other context. And machine readability, of course, offers us to do this in a scalable way with large amounts of data. To achieve this, we are currently developing a formalized ontology, which is based basically on the description of coats of arms by terms of blason. And here the classes and relations incorporate the different heraldic terms and layers of a coat of arms. And with this, we aim to propose a formalized and standardized way to describe heraldic sources in general. At this moment, the classification of heraldic imagery based on our ontology still has to be done manually, but in the long run, this should be done at least semi-automatically as well. And for this component of our infrastructure, we are developing an image classifier with machine learning methods doing semantic segmentation on the elements in the coats of arms. Yeah, like you can see here in this example, the machine learning network would detect the fish on the coat of arms, and you could label it as a fish and therefore distinguish it from other elements on this coat of arms. And this task is done in collaboration with a team of computer scientists from the University of Münster. So at this point, we can detect and localize individual coats of arms on seals and in manuscript, but there's, of course, a central challenge we need to address here. So how do we get all this data? Naturally, all our sources cannot be provided by a single archive, library, or data repository, since heraldry as a form of visual communication was a European-wide phenomenon. And therefore, we have to acquire data from a great institutional and geographical variety of providers of cultural heritage objects. And with regard to the amount of data we are dealing with, the acquisition of our data should be done as automatically as possible. So in the second part of the presentation, I would therefore like to concentrate further on the preconditions that support a data-driven project working with distributed sources like ours I presented here. And in essence, for this, data should follow the FAIR principles. It should be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. This goes for data provided by archives, but also provided by other GLAM institutions. And I will illustrate this shortly from our own project's perspective. Findability in general, of course, means that data can be found through its metadata that describes the data itself. In the case of historical sources, this would refer in general to the context of the source. There are two ways in understanding what the context of a source actually means. From an archival perspective, this is mostly, of course, the respect du fond, so the context of provenance of a single historical document in an archive. And as you know, this is, of course, what most archives describe with their metadata. And to this, I would add the historical researcher's perspective of historical context. This would, in general, be metadata about known entities that existed independently from the source itself, but that are linked in some way to the existence of the source. In concrete terms, this would be agents like individual persons, groups of persons, or institutions, agents who created or reused the source and places they are linked to, but also the relevant circumstances where a source was created in the shape of events and time spans. And this kind of metadata is a premise for historians to actually infer new knowledge, as you know. If we want to, in our case, study how coats of arms were used as a means for visual communication, the simple evidence of a coat of arms does, of course, not suffice. Rather, we need to know how, when, and by whom the single coat of arms has been used. And another important precondition for data-driven research across multiple data providers would be accessibility. This means also for historians, this means accessibility for machines provided through application programming interface or short APIs. Only in this way is it possible to process large amounts of data automatically. Of course, there are other ways to get data, like, for example, web scraping. In our case, we used a Python script to acquire the images and metadata on seals provided by the French database Sigilla. This database has no API, but is just a digital representation of a seal catalog, so to speak. But this web scraping approach has, of course, many disadvantages. Firstly, I have to program a new individual solution for each archive, museum, library, or other database whose data I want to include in the corpus of historical sources for my research. This is not only time-consuming, but secondly puts the task of homogenization into the hands of the researcher. This means deciding which fields of metadata from two different data providers are equivalent to each other, but it means also to homogenize the value of the metadata. Like in this example, we have here parts of 3 metadata sets from 3 different manuscripts provided by 3 different libraries. And among other things, you can see here that the manuscripts are dated, but the field name, so to speak, for the metadata is has 4 different names. It's got state, it's century, its date of origin, and in brackets English, and its date statement. And I would have to state that this is actually the same. But then also the value of this metadata is different. You have here this simple time span. Here you have 14th century, and you have around 1330 and so on. So as a human being, this is of course easy to understand, and you can work with this. But to make this processable by a machine, which could, for example, also mean to visualize occurrences of these manuscripts on a timeline, then I would have to homogenize this and set a certain way how I want to present my dates like this. And you have a similar problem with the persons that are related to the manuscripts. In this case, it's fairly simple. It's labeled author, and you have a person's name. Okay. Here you have persons where I don't know. Okay, is this the same as author, or is this another relation? In the value field, it says former possessor, but former possessor is of course a role and not the name of the person. And where here's only the name of the person. So again, I would have to homogenize this data so that it, that I have a single way of talking about this data across 3 different representations. So I acquired this by web scraping, but if the data provider now makes only slight changes to the web page we scraped this data from, the whole pipeline has to be adapted or even recreated again. So this can only be a makeshift solution. And examples for making historical sources available through standardized APIs exists, but are, especially in the case of archives, not yet widespread. There is, of course, the Archives Portal Europe, which was presented yesterday morning by Kerstin Arnold. And here archival data is made accessible through an API, for example, using standards like encoding archival description, like we learned yesterday. And Europeana would be another example, which provides cultural heritage data through its own data model via an API, and also even through a Sparkle endpoint. And to provide image data, IIIF is increasingly adapted as a standard. In our case, the IIIF presentation API is important to access image scans of digitized manuscripts that are provided by different libraries across Europe. Although IIIF is, in this case, also used by the libraries to share metadata about the sources. But it is important to note that these are not provided in a standardized way, as presented in the example you can still see on the slide. And standardized ontologies and vocabularies are, of course, necessary to solve this problem. This leads us to the next topic of interoperability. We have to agree how we are describing data from the perspective of machine readability. And there exist an increasing number of upper-level shared conceptualizations, like CIDOC-CRM is, of course, increasingly used to describe and contextualize cultural heritage data. But there are also initiatives from the archival domain that are interesting for historical research. A newer standard by the International Council on Archives would be the records in context ontology. Although it is not yet widely employed by institutions, this model is promising for the needs of data-driven historical research. Its classes describe historical documents, not only in their context of provenance, but also in their historical context. Historical documents, or records in their terms, are modeled as entities that are created, reused, or acquired by an agent, again in the form of a person or an institution. And this creation, reuse, or acquiring is done at a specific time and in relation to a specific place. And such an approach, centering on events and agents and placing sources in their historical context, would be an important precondition for data-driven research that spans multiple data providers. The widespread usage of an ontology like records in context would therefore make archival sources way more interoperable. And as a last aspect, there is reusability. Naturally, everything we talked about up to this point enables the reuse of European cultural heritage for historical research. And To this, I would like to add the problem of licensing again. To work, data-driven research needs data to be open. As another example from practice, I would like to introduce a database on coats of arms provided by the Tyrolean State Museum. And this database is actually the digitization of a handwritten and hand-drawn catalog collecting coats of arms from the regions of Tyrol in Austria and Italy, like you can see here. And since the images of coats of arms are linked to the families who bore them, this data can be an important reference for the study of the use of heraldry. Like you can see, is linked to the family catalog. But unfortunately, the images are protected by copyright, and their reuse costs money. To be precise, 16.50 euros per document. So for one coat of arms, you have to pay this amount of money. Of course, copyright is not an easy issue, especially for GLAM institutions. In one short, the Tyrolean State Museums will have reasons to protect their data in this way. The database makes a good reference catalog nonetheless, but when we want to make use of new digital methods for our research, this imposes a high barrier on processing such resources. Especially when new data is being created through image data, like in our case, through the detection of coats of arms by machine learning networks on these images. In this case, open data offers a huge potential for historical research. You have also seen this yesterday during the second presentation of the day by Artem. To conclude now, digital methods enable us with new approaches to research historical sources and archives and make it possible to analyze them in new and innovative ways. But this is not possible without a few preconditions. In summary, these following points would support, from our point of view, the use of digital methods in historical studies. And firstly, it would be helpful if historical sources and their metadata would be made available in a formalized and standardized way. This should ideally be done through standardized APIs, so that the data is automatically processable by machines on a large scale. And the reusability of metadata would, from a research perspective, be increased if they would not only describe the provenance of a source, but also contain information on its historical context. This is a complex endeavor for the whole of historical scholarship. Therefore, minimal standards describing relations to relevant agents, events, time spans, and places would already be very helpful if they were more widely employed. And finally, cultural heritage data should be understood as part of our common cultural heritage and thus being openly available and reusable. This point was also made yesterday by someone from the audience, as well as by Artem in the second presentation of the day. And I would like to emphasize this point here again very strongly. From the perspective of research projects like ours we introduced in the beginning, we propose these points as supporting steps, not only for unlocking the European digital treasures on a large scale and integrating them together to further enhance our efforts to research and write a common history of Europe, but also, as Thomas Eigner stated yesterday, we increasingly understand historical sources as entities of information. At the same time, the methodology to study these information in historical research is subject to change and tends to a more data-driven perspective. And as archivists and information providers and as researchers, we should work in this together and prepare for these changes. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Torsten, for that highly interesting and inspiring presentation. From my point of view, as an archivist, having had the question very often, what kind of coat of arms is that, and how to identify a certain coat of arms on a parchment or in a document, and in not few cases I did not find a solution. It's quite cool that in the future we will have something like OCR for coat of arms. So we wish you good luck in your project, and are looking forward really very much to that. But also to create results in new ways of research on coat of arms, because I think coat of arms are a quite neglected topic in historical research, and through your project, coat of arms could be brought much more into the focus of historical research. So my compliments and congratulations to your project. But I'm just the moderator, and I'm not the one who should ask questions. My dear audience, would you like to ask some questions to our colleagues in Berlin? Sultan.
So thank you for your really very interesting project. My question would be very pragmatic. So maybe just for me, it wasn't 100% clear at what stage your development is.
Okay, then I answered. The part of the machine learning pipeline I illustrated that does detect coats of arms in documents. This is working. There is room for improvement always, but we can do this. We are currently in the process of finishing the first stage of our ontology, because okay, I don't know how deeply I can or have to go in there, but in ontology is of course more than just a classical metadata model. Of course, it includes this let me just go back a second to the slide with the ontology. You have of course these all these terms and the hierarchical structure of a coat of arms, and you have to implement that. But there's of course more to this. You can, for example, employ rules in an ontology. You can in this case state that some terms can only be used in a specific context, and thus you can make it easier to search through data with such an ontology. So yeah, this is something we have not yet done, but which would be a next step. And as for the segmentation, this one, we are. I don't know if Torsten Hiltmann wants to say something about this, or should I continue?
Yeah, I can take over from here. So hello to everyone in Alicante and in the internet. And sorry that we can't be there. It was a little bit for medical reasons and so on, as you know it. Okay, but where are we for the semantic segmentation? There we are about to we tried it via automatic tools, so machine learning, but we have the problem that we have there a long tail problem or imbalance. So then, because a few charges, a few figures heraldic and heraldry are commonly very often, like 20% of coat of arms, something like this, have a line. But really, there are many other figures that are not so often to find in coat of arms, and so it's really difficult to learn a machine or to teach a machine to detect it. So we are now about to find other solutions, what we want also to put into a research program. And so therefore the semantic segmentation, we are a little bit stuck, but we have solutions we want to proceed on. But for overall, for the detection, we are in a good way. We are able to detect coat of arms. We are now finding solutions to segment, to make a semantic segmentation. And concerning the ontology we are coming up, we have now collected all our or many descriptions from several databases, and we are coming up with an ontology until the end of the year, and then we will go on and try to put both things together. And this would be a first step, because the integration of the metadata of different representations of the different documents and objects would be a further step then to help to identify the concrete coat of arms. So the first step is the description of coat of arms, and to try to make it as automatically as possible. And the second step, which is a little bit further in time and in our project, would be the identification of concrete coat of arms, and then the possibility to research also for the historical context and so on. I hope this answers this question, and yeah.
Thank you very much for that really inspiring presentation. We are a little bit in delay, but one quick question. Have I got you right that you are still looking for material to work with in your project?
Yeah, we are still collecting. We are collecting different resources, and we are still always looking for material, especially if it has metadata on it, in a way that we can proceed it, process it automatically. Because it's for a moment it's really a problem for us that every collection comes with its own metadata schema, and we have always to adapt our process. And it would be nice, especially to have rich metadata, or it would be also already sufficient, like in the Hungarian National Library, which is really a nice collection there for coat of arms and documents on coat of arms. When you have the metadata in a machine processable way. To answer the question, yes, we are still looking for, or we are always looking for.
That's what I wanted to hear, because here in the audience here are sitting representatives of many archives all over Europe. So if you have material, please just send it to Torsten and Philipp. I think it's in our common interest that research on coat of arms is driven forward very rapidly. So thank you very much. We're a little bit in delay, and but I think it's good to be here and to talk to each other. And